Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking an early look at the brand new Community Day Brutal Swing CONKELDURR, powered all the way up to level 50 in the Open Master League. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Smudgy B, so many thanks for the battle submission. Brutal Swing is a nice addition to CONKELDURR. It gives CONKELDURR a true bait move. It's now running Brutal Swing and Dynamic Punch. Master League, of course, isn't currently available, so these are some Master League practice battles. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Brutal Swing CONKELDURR in the Master League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a Dream Lead Metagross into mamoswine. Opponent save switches into Dialga, and Dialga will be answered with the new Calm Day CONKELDURR. CONKELDURR is going to be shielding up the Iron Head. CONKELDURR, these counters are tearing through the Dialga, not wanting to risk Dialga making the Iron Head, so CONKELDURR is going to fire off the Brutal Swing. Opponent now forced to send in Giratina, as of course they don't really want to send in a mamoswine into a loaded CONKELDURR, but this is where CONKELDURR having Brutal Swing is quite nice, as Brutal Swing is going to do massive damage onto this Giratina. Brutal Swing is going to connect. Giratina gets the farm down, but it's met with Yveltal. Back in comes the mamoswine. Mamoswine is going to be answered with the Metagross. Metagross going straight for the Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash will be shielded by the mamoswine. Mamoswine has the shield advantage, and the opponent needs it to close here. And mamoswine bait makes things a bit tricky. Metagross farming up, winning CMP over the mamoswine, as the Meteor Mash will go before the high horsepower. The Meteor Mash is going to be shielded, and now mamoswine will get to connect with the high horsepower. That gets the KO. In comes Yveltal. Yveltal farming up, but the catch from the opponent, catching the Dark Pulse back onto the Giratina, and mamoswine is going to be able to make the Avalanche. Is this going to be enough to KO? This is massive, super effective damage. Avalanche barely does not. Mamoswine will get KO'd, and Yveltal takes the win with 1 HP. Tough lead in the next match, Metagross into Kyogre. The Yveltal save switch is going to be answered with Togekiss, and everything going wrong to start this match. Hurricane is going to connect. Can Yveltal make it to the Dark Pulse? No, it cannot. The Charm is just able to get the KO. Nicely done waiting out the timer here, as the Metagross is not going to want to be stuck against that Kyogre for very long. Togekiss is going to be firing off the Aura Sphere. One nice thing about Togekiss now running Aura Sphere instead of Flamethrower is, of course, Aura Sphere a lot less threatening to Metagross. In comes Kyogre, and this Earthquake will do a solid chunk of damage. Kyogre doesn't have to shield it, and they're going to let that go. In comes CONKELDURR, and CONKELDURR will immediately be answered with a Surf. CONKELDURR commits to shield. We see Kyogre staying in this matchup. It looks like the opponent might be weak in the back, firing off this Brutal Swing. That gets the KO in the back. It's Dialga, and this might turn into a fast move beatdown for CONKELDURR. CONKELDURR continues the farm. We see the Iron Head thrown by the Dialga. CONKELDURR commits the shield. Looks like CONKELDURR is just going to go for the full fast move farm down here. It's going to be a race. Bullet punches versus the Dragon Breath, but the Dialga, with a sliver of HP remaining, makes the last second Iron Head and will get the win. Picking up a decent lead in the next match, Metagross into Dragonite. Dragonite typically accompanied by Steel types in the back, so that should be good news for CONKELDURR. Dragonite able to outpace, making the potential superpower before the Meteor Mash. Dragonite is gonna full send. Dragonite farming, going for the catch onto Excadrill, but great patience there, and the Earthquake will be shielded by the Exca, but Exca is now answered with that CONKELDURR. CONKELDURR, these counters are absolutely shredding through the Exca. Exca goes for the Drill Run, that is going to connect, and CONKELDURR is going to fire off the Brutal Swing, denying Excadrill a second Drill Run, and Brutal Swing will get the KO. Since CONKELDURR no longer runs Stone Edge, that does make matchups like into Dragonite a bit tougher, but as you're going to see, again, having the cheaper charge move is really, really nice, as CONKELDURR might not make a Stone Edge here, whereas it can definitely make a Brutal Swing. Dragonite leaves with energy, in comes the Metagross, and unfortunately Metagross gets denied there. The fast move does not go through. Dragon Claw will connect. Metagross continuing to farm. We see a switch into Yveltal, and Dragonite will fire off the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw is going to connect. Dragonite staying in. Looks like whatever the opponent has in the back is weak to Yveltal. Yveltal will shield up the 1 HP Dragon Claw from the Dragonite in the back. It's their own Metagross, and Yveltal is looking to sweep this endgame. Dark Pulse, massive super effective damage. Yveltal continues to farm. The Metagross attempting a bullet punch farm down, but it's just not in a position to win here, and Yveltal will make it to the back-to-back Dark Pulses. Dark Pulse number 1 will get the shield, and Dark Pulse number 2 will be massive overkill onto the Metagross, securing the win. Moving into the next match, picking up a positive lead, we see the Metagross into the Dialga. Metagross, of course, its Earthquake did get a nerf with the Season 16 update, but even so, it can do pretty solidly into Dialga. Metagross overfarming by 1, going for a Meteor Mash bait here into the Dialga, and Dialga is going to commit the shield. Metagross continuing to farm. Dialga well past the Draco Meteor here. Metagross calls the bait. It's the Iron Head. That's a massive call. Opponent is going to send in Mewtwo, and Mewtwo is going to be hit with the Meteor Mash. That does quite a lot of damage. Metagross continuing to farm. We see a switch into Yveltal. Now, of course, you may have noticed the opponent in these battles is me, so I do go for the Hyper Beam, but Smudgy is well aware of my shenanigans, so unfortunately I do not get to land the Hyper Beam. In comes the Dialga going for the Draco Meteor on what would be a CMP tied to the Dark Pulse. Yveltal is able to withstand the Draco Meteor and fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse will not KO, but it will get Dialga low, and now it's time for CONKELDURR in the back. It is Kyogre. CONKELDURR continuing to farm. Kyogre is going to fire off the Surf. We see the shield from CONKELDURR. CONKELDURR, of course, now has a bait move in Brutal Swing and going for the bait. Tough call to make for the opponent. They commit the shield. CONKELDURR farming up, making the Dynamic Punch. This is same type attack bonus damage. Dynamic Punch gets them low. Kyogre able to hang on with a sliver of HP and make it to the last second Surf. Surf will get the KO, but Metagross farms down Kyogre and leaves with the Meteor Mash loaded. Meteor Mash easily takes care of Dialga, and that's a good game. Tough lead in the next match, Metagross into Giratina Origin. This team is ABA weak to Giratina. Farming up, we see the attempted catch of the Shadow Ball onto Yveltal, but the opponent holds on to their energy, and now the Yveltal save switch will be answered with Xerneas. Again, on this team, Yveltal is running Hurricane, as the goal of the Yveltal is to bait out the Fairy type to clear the way for CONKELDURR in the back. Moonblast will get the KO, that is massive damage, and now gonna wait the clock and send back in the Metagross. Metagross continuing to farm. The Xerneas makes the last second close combat. Close combat will not KO, but it will get the Metagross low, so Metagross will commit the shield. Opponent sends in Giratina, but Giratina loses CMP to Metagross. Metagross fires off the Meteor Mash, and we do see a shield from the Giratina. Giratina does have enough for the Shadow Ball, and we do see the shield from the Metagross. Metagross going for the Meteor Mash before Giratina is able to make another Shadow Ball. Meteor Mash will be no shielded. This will get the Giratina low. Giratina, now in the red, is going to fire off the charge move. It's the Shadow Ball. That will get the KO. In comes CONKELDURR. If they have a Steel type in the back, this is potentially winnable if CONKELDURR can get the farm down. CONKELDURR fires off the Brutal Swing on the CMP tie. Honestly, I'm surprised to learn that CONKELDURR wins CMP over Giratina. Giratina goes for the Shadow Ball. It's going to be a race. CONKELDURR versus Giratina. And the Giratina on 1 HP makes it to the Ominous Wind. And that's game over. Looking for a bit of redemption in the next match and picking up a pretty okay lead. Leading the Metagross into the Mewtwo. Opponent save switches into Dialga, and Dialga will be met with CONKELDURR. Now, something we learned during the course of these battles is that CONKELDURR can actually one-shield fully farm down the Dialga save switch and leave with a truly overwhelming amount of energy to threaten the Mewtwo. In comes the Mewtwo. Mewtwo is going to have to deal with possibly up to 3 Brutal Swings here. Brutal Swing will connect, going for Brutal Swing number 2 into the Mewtwo. Mewtwo, thinking about it, is going to let it go. In comes Metagross, but CONKELDURR is just so much spammier now with Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing does big damage, and now this battle is just going to turn into a fast move farm down. The opponent holding on to those 2 shields, and unfortunately for them, they're going to get KO'd with those 2 shields intact, as Yveltal is doing exactly what it needs to in this situation. If your opponent has 2 shields, just commit to the farm down. And that's exactly what Yveltal is going to be able to do here. Yveltal able to get the Metagross to 1 HP. In comes CONKELDURR. CONKELDURR doesn't get to throw its counter for some reason, but it's not going to matter. And that's a good game. Great lead in the next match, Metagross into Zacian. Opponent is going to save switch into Dialga, and Dialga will again be answered with Conkeldurr. Dialga is probably the most common save switch you're going to see in the Master League, and Conkeldurr, as I mentioned, being able to get that one shield farm down is quite nice. Conkeldurr continuing to farm. Conkeldurr decides not to risk it, as we saw in an earlier battle. Conkeldurr can actually get the one shield farm down, but even so, even if Conkeldurr did get the farm down, the energy is not very useful going up against Zacian. And that is a bit of the trade-off here, is since you're not running Stone Edge, you have nothing when you go up against a Fairy type, but the good news is again, you are a lot spammier, so in my view, it's a pretty decent trade-off. In comes the Metagross. Metagross will be hit with a close combat here from the Zacian. Opponent going to look to switch in the back. It's Yveltal, and now we have the Yveltal mirror. Yveltal farming up and going for the Hurricane here. Hurricane does some very solid damage. Neither a Hurricane nor a potential Focus Blast would be enough to KO, but it does sizable damage. One shield remaining, using it here, and that proves to be a good decision as it was the Focus Blast from the opponent. Yveltal continuing to farm, going for the Hurricane, and that looked like a CMP tie here. These are both Hundo Yveltals, so that is the coin flip. Hurricane is going to connect. Yveltal goes for the Focus Blast. That does massive damage. Continuing to farm, making it to the Dark Pulse, and this Dark Pulse should be threatening the final shield there. Dark Pulse does get the final shield. Opponent massively over farming here, playing to the coin flip CMP tie, but this time the opponent wins it, and that's unfortunate as they have the back-to-back Dark Pulses loaded. Metagross just shy of a charge move, and that's game over. Hopping into the final match, leading Metagross into Rayquaza, and Rayquaza is staying in. A lot of Rayquaza lead teams are pretty weak to Metagross, and it looks like this is no exception. Rayquaza is going to be firing off the Breaking Swipe into the Metagross. Metagross immediately returns fire with the debuffed Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash is going to connect into Rayquaza. Continuing to farm, we see a switch into Yveltal, and Yveltal will be able to bait out the Xerneas that was lurking in the back. Again, being able to bait out the Fairy type is a very important part of this team, as without it, Xerneas just completely sweeps the backline. Xerneas has overfarmed a decent amount here. Moonblast is a really good move, and that is massive overkill onto Yveltal. But now this does set up the Metagross quite nicely. In comes the Metagross. Metagross looking for a potential farm down here. Metagross is going to have to respect the close combat, as close combat would do quite a bit, but Metagross now leaves with a lot of energy. And in comes the final Pokemon, and it's a Mud Slap Rhyperior. Meteor Mash will be shielded. Metagross has a nice amount of energy here. Very nice charge move timing there. Throwing 4 and the move. Meteor Mash is going to get the shield. And now it is Conkeldurr time. No shields remaining for the opponent. Opponent's going to need to try and make a catch here. Breaking Swipe is going to debuff Conkeldurr. Continuing to farm up with Rhyperior. Opponent goes for the catch. They send in Rayquaza, going for the Breaking Swipe, and then will be shielded. Conkeldurr, can it get the counter down? Yes, it can. Rhyperior left with a move, but that's another Master League Pokemon that Conkeldurr is going to win the CMP tie over, and even debuffed, Dynamic Punch will secure the win. And now some final thoughts on Brutal Swing Conkeldurr. First off, Brutal Swing is a really nice addition. Previously, Conkeldurr's cheapest move was Dynamic Punch, and Counter and Dynamic Punch is not the fastest combination around. Whereas having Brutal Swing, it does make Conkeldurr quite a bit spammier, and getting to charge moves faster than it did previously is universally a positive thing. It's basically never a negative when it comes to Pokemon Go. However, the Open Master League at the moment is very hostile to fighting types. There's a lot of flyers, there's a lot of ghosts, which Brutal Swing does help with to a certain extent, although it's still not a comfortable matchup for Conkeldurr, and of course the Fairy types, Xerneas and the OG Zacian are ever present. Where I think Conkeldurr with Brutal Swing is really going to shine is in the Master Premier meta. Unfortunately, we don't have the Master Premier meta this season. It seems like we're having it every other season, so hopefully it returns when the next season arrives in December. Because Brutal Swing is a really nice addition in the Master Premier Cup, allowing Conkeldurr increased play into stuff like Metagross and Goldengo, while still retaining its ability to do very well into its neutral matchups. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.